Leslie Griffin, and I want to acknowledge my colleague Ursula from the British American Business Council, who is my comrade in all things women in world trade and certainly worked with me on today's program. I also want to thank Emily Westhoven, who is the Executive Director of the German American Business Council of Boston, who is kindly making her GABC Zoom platform available to us, and also, as I said, recording the program. You will find the program in a short period of time in our on the LinkedIn page that we've created for our group, and on a YouTube page that Ursula has set up for us. So if people you know weren't able to make it and want to take a look, you'll find that up there sometime soon. So today we are going to be talking about, I think the title of our program was Helping New England Go Global, Lessons Learned from Careers in Trade Promotion. And that topic, we thought, allows us to do two things. One, of course, talk about the substance of the kind of advice that these two longtime trade experts give to their clients, companies large and small, advice they're giving in these unusual times about how to navigate the current crisis we're all going through, but also to talk about careers in trade promotion, because these are two women who have a wealth of experience and many years in the field. So we'll get to do a little bit of both of those things. And we have a couple of young women on the call who may be interested in it from that perspective. In terms of format, I'm going to do brief introductions of our two speakers. I'll then turn it over to them to do a little bit more self-introduction, maybe to add a couple of opening comments before we start the dialogue. And then I have a series of questions just to kick us off and start the conversation. But of course, we want to broaden it out to all of you. So probably for the last 15, 20 minutes, we'll be looking to our chat room to see what questions that you may have. So I encourage you to do that. And we are pleased that after our first two programs, which had very much a Massachusetts focus, we're glad to be broadening out today and bring in two of our region's top trade experts from outside the Bay State, from both Rhode Island and New Hampshire. So let me quickly start with some brief introductions, and as I said, then I'll turn it to our speakers. So Dawn Wivell was the founder and the director of the New Hampshire International Trade Resource Center for over 20 years. She served on New Hampshire's International Trade Advisory Committee, and she now runs her own international business development consulting firm, Firebrand International. We are also very pleased to have Linda Woulfe, the Assistant Director of the Chafee Center for International Business at Bryant College in Smithfield, Rhode Island. Linda has managed global business operations for both domestic and international companies, and she brings extensive experience with export administration, global product management, global sourcing, and general business management. And as we did a little bit of prep for this call, we discovered, and maybe Dawn, you may want to mention this in your opening, but Dawn actually had some connections to the Chafee Center that we unearthed in the prep for this call. So let me turn it over to you to just start with some introductory opening comments, then I'll ask Linda to do the same, and then we'll kick into our Q&A.
Yeah, actually it was interesting because for me, everything is about connections. And so, you know, when you were having, you know, the Chafee Center come on board, I remembered back in 1990 that I'm a big ecosystem person, and Bryant College was my very first partner when I was developing the International Trade Resource Center. They gave us an amazing tool to work with. It was called the ITDN. That was way before the internet and way before the kind of data collection that we're very used to now. It was actually developed by a really weird guy who was brilliant and troubled, but you know, I loved him. He was one of the Sputnik children, so he was absolutely brilliant, had zero social capabilities, and I just did that, but created this, and Bryant College just sort of nurtured all of that, and you know, they were really at the forefront of market research, really. So I was kind of cool that we're, you know, doing this together. So just really quickly, I'm originally from California, and I have lived in Italy, Scotland, Texas, and now here. I've been in New Hampshire for 30 years, so that tells you how old I am, because I had to live in all those other places too. I've been in a lot of different industries, public, private, and nonprofit. I was in the oil business in Italy. I worked for a telephone company. I ran a trading company that was private. I worked for the Italian Trade Commission in Texas, not in Italy. In Italy, I worked for the Americans. And then I moved to New Hampshire because I wanted to raise my son in a place where I didn't have to worry about gang violence. And I was a single mother since I was 20. So I got tired of worrying about all that stuff. And I just zeroed in on New England, studied every state, ended up coming to New Hampshire for a variety of reasons. Worked in Massachusetts at Toll, which is the oldest company in America, for a few months. And then I saw this ad in the paper for trade specialist in the state of New Hampshire, and I just applied for it. And it's funny because I had been used to those kinds of jobs being a little bit corrupt. And in other words, you have to know someone to get a job with a state. New Hampshire happens to be super squeaky clean, so there's none of that. But ended up applying for the job. Turns out New Hampshire was the only state in the country that did not have an international trade program. And I had never worked for a state, let alone, and I didn't even know who the governor was at the time. I got the job and I had to develop this program. The budget was, you know, in true New England form, the budget was $8,000. So I had to create this program, which, you know, I'm going to sound so arrogant, but back then, literally people would say to me that they were exporters because they would sell to Vermont. That's how basic the programs had needed to be back then, and that was 1990. So we developed a program partnering with the U.S. Department of Commerce, with people like Bryant College, the SBA, the SBDC, UNH, AID, Exim Bank, and we put everybody under one roof, like everybody living together in the same house, and made them, I forced them to work together. And we ended up having an amazing, won many awards for, you know, being sort of the first one-stop shop. And we ended up getting a grant, and so I didn't have to work on that $8,000 budget anymore. And yeah, that's me. And then I worked there for 21 years, and we were at Pease Air Force Base, and you know, then I left when they started decimating the program because I was no longer interested in fighting for it, and started my own.
I think we might be having some audio.
Somehow I lost sound.
There we go. I think we're back.
Oh, good. I thought it was just me.
I keep on losing sound too, so I'm not sure. I'm a little nervous about that.
Thank you for the introduction, Dawn. Clearly, I offered an extremely condensed version of your bio.
Because I'm 64 years old, so you could talk for forever to talk about everything I've done. So yeah, just hold. That's all. Yeah.
So how about you, Linda? Over to you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for asking me to participate today. I'm flattered, but you know, your introduction made me feel so old. Like we've been around so long and we've seen so much. A lot of times when I'm talking with students here at Bryant, like in global supply chain management or international business, and I tell them, it's like when I started in the business, there was no such thing as global supply chain management. There were no classes and anything like that. There was no classes in international business. It wasn't a thing. You know, so you kind of ended up almost just by happenstance in the field. So for me, just really interestingly, when I was in high school, I was chosen to be part of an exchange program sponsored by Volkswagen. And I spent a summer in Germany with a German family. Their daughter stayed with my family. And I started to learn a little bit of German, and I absolutely loved it, and came back and said, that's what I want to study. So I went to school and studied languages, got my degree, and then said, now what do I do? I don't want to teach. I really didn't want to go into business, but ended up getting a job with a German company as an import-export assistant. No idea what that meant. and learned from the ground up, basically because of my love of languages. And my career has just taken me on so many different paths since then. I went from working for the company to going to work for a freight forwarder, customs broker, seeing it sort of on the other side, where instead of dealing with just one set of products, I was dealing with a lot of different products, going to a lot of places around the world, which was a lot of fun. I left there and became an export manager for a local manufacturing company in Rhode Island. So again, going back into the private industry side of it. 3 children later, I was going back to school. I was getting my master's degree in international business, and I got involved with the Chafee Center at Bryant University. Back then it was known as the Rhode Island Export Assistance Center, and I was actually one of the first consultants in international business that started working with them, got my degree, and I ended up getting a great job with a company that was initially based in Italy, went into a joint venture with a company from Chile, became 100% Chilean, and basically represented their interest in the United States for about 12 years. So it was primarily focused on importing, and my job was, it was all food products. My job was to build the business for them in the United States, handling the importation, but also the distribution and setting up warehousing and labeling and product development and everything else. And it was a really, great opportunity, but due to a wide variety of reasons, working for a Chilean company and their investment in the market, I left there and went to work for another startup company based in Chicago. Again, very interesting. It was a startup company that had the Disney license for confectionery products, and it was a company made up of 5 different confectionery companies. One was Palmer Chocolates, one was Spangler, one was Necco, which everybody in Massachusetts may remember, that's gone out of business. So we had a wide variety of products all under the Disney license, and I was Director of Global Sourcing in that particular position. Unfortunately, the venture didn't survive, and I ended up back in Rhode Island working for products for CVS as a senior product manager, and then ended up back at the Chafee Center, which has really been a really great move for me, because with all of the different things I've done on international trade, both on the import side and the export side, and managing a business and setting up businesses and industries, I now am able to use that to help other companies. So I've been with the Chafee Center now for 9 years. And my role there is basically to work with companies on any of their international trade issues, from training to one-on-one consulting to managing a grant program. And I kind of think it's a great sort of culmination of my career to be able to share what I've learned with everybody else. And, it's funny, one of the things that Dawn mentioned is that when I started out, exporting, people didn't really know what it was. And I can remember being with this manufacturing company in Rhode Island, it's called Kenny Manufacturing, and doing a presentation. I was the only export person, and doing a presentation at the sales meeting, and really having to explain to them what exporting was, because it wasn't talked about. It wasn't recognized as a thing. And that's changed so much over the years, where people have really become much more sophisticated. You have all of the university programs now that are training people in international topics, and it's sort of recognized that it's all intertwined with international. When I teach a class at Bryant on international trade and logistics, and I basically tell them is that I don't care what your degree is, whether it's marketing or finance or accounting or supply chain or entrepreneurship, you need to know the basics of international business, because it's going to apply no matter what you do. So anybody who's involved in anything to do with international, I think it's the most exciting place to be, but it's where you have to be for today's world, because we are a global marketplace. So that's me in a nutshell.
Great. No, thank you very much. And if I could do a little plug for the Chafee Center, for those of you who don't know it well, Linda kindly invited me to participate in their World Trade Day last year. And my goodness, for a small state, you should see the turnout that World Trade Day Rhode Island gets. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of people. It was like a stadium at the lunch forum. So it's pretty incredible, the level of interest and the services that you provide. Before we transition to sort of some of the like the nuts and bolts of the advice you give to companies and how you provide that service, let's just do one last question on the issue of sort of careers and women in trade. We are women in world trade. Dawn, in our prep call for this session, you had some very interesting thoughts about women and about why women do very well in this field. And you also actually had some thoughts too on some of the challenges that being a woman in this field presents. But I'd love to just hear your thoughts or share with the group because I thought they were interesting. Oh, I think we've lost
Dawn, yeah, Dawn, we can't,
Here we go.
we can't hear you, Dawn. Can you hear us? Okay, she's connecting to audio. The other audio is on, right? Leslie, you can hear.
Now can you hear me?
Yes, here she.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
good.
good. So it's
Sorry, I had switched to phone audio because I keep losing the audio and it was not muted. So I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so yeah, we were talking, getting prepared for this, and I was talking about the fact that I love that this group has come back together because I think women play and have played a really critical role in international trade. I remember when I started the trade program that as I was working with, we had maybe 2,500, 2,200 small business clients. We're in New Hampshire, so we're 98% small business. And I kept on noticing that for once, I was not the only female at the table a lot of times. And, you know, it was noticeable that a lot of women were involved in international trade development. And I started to look into it, and, you know, it turned out that back in the day, before it became a thing, as Linda said, a lot of times the international thing would just be a side note or a secondary consideration. And there were things like logistical documentation, export documentation compliance, things like that, that they would just sort of throw at the closest admin person who was always a female. And they were very good at it because it was very detail oriented and that kind of thing, or it required detail orientation, and they then would grow from there. So if I were to give a compliance class, literally 99% of the people that were participating were women. But the thing that I found really more interesting was the fact that women are really good at appreciating the ins and outs of dealing with other cultures. They have a lot more appreciation for it, tolerance for it, patience, curiosity, respect above all, for the fact that there are all kinds of differences dealing with other cultures. And so I think that's why women have done a really good job in international trade development, in international marketing, in developing relationships. They're very good at developing networks. I just find that really phenomenal. And I don't think, that I've never heard anybody else say that, but that's my considered opinion, I guess. So, good for us.
Thank you. Well, Linda, let's come back over to you for the sort of a question about your work. And I think often it's those big multinationals that make the headlines about trade or getting caught up in trade wars and whatnot. But really, you need to, in your role, tailor your expertise to a much more of a small and medium-sized company audience. And I'm curious from your work, what kinds of sort of risks of overseas market or regulatory burdens of overseas markets do you hear most frequently are the challenges that they're sort of most concerned about being able to overcome? So
Sure.
what are the hurdles that they raise most often?
Yeah. So, one of the things we struggle with is that we want to encourage people to engage in international business. We want them to become exporters. We know there's opportunities out there, but we also know there's risks, and there's also this thing called export compliance. And people seem to think that, oh, I'm not making weapons of mass destruction, I'm not dealing in guns and defense items, so I don't have to worry about it. And, trying to educate people that you do need to be aware of it. You may not need as hefty an export compliance manual as a defense company, but you still need to be aware of it and comply with it, is one of the challenges that we have to balance, because we don't want to scare them away, but at the same time, we want to make them aware and help them be successful. So in fact, I just did a webinar this morning with the local SBA and the SBDC and our US Commercial Service, trying to get small businesses to start exporting, and trying to give them all the statistics that say this is why you should be exporting. 95% of the world's business is outside of the United States, and economic growth is going to be outside of the United States, and you want to become an exporter, but at the same time, it has to be the right fit. It has to be something that's right for you, that you have the resources to be able to do it. In fact, one of the things that we spent a lot of time going over was export readiness assessment. Is this really the right move for you at this time? Do you have the resources? Or, as I like to say, we're in Rhode Island. If you haven't sold into Massachusetts yet, you might want to do that first before you think about going to, Korea or Japan or, Chile. So, there's a lot of help that people need. So I feel like I'm in a really great position to be able to provide that assistance, but it's always a balance.
Okay. And Dawn, it's kind of similar type question. You mentioned earlier in your comment about you're a big supporter of ecosystems. I've also heard you talk about your support of consortium approaches, where groups of companies, maybe groups of small or mid-sized companies, team up and might go in together, for example, on an RFP, team up on an export opportunity. And I'm wondering, do you think that's a way that smaller companies can kind of box above their weight class sort of thing? Number one. And number two, do you think our region does that well? Do you see examples of that, of companies teaming up to pursue opportunities? Oh, we lost audio.
I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can
Yep.
you hear me now? Okay, this is annoying. So yeah, I am a huge believer in consortium, collaboratives, ecosystems, especially for smaller businesses. I learned about export consortia in particular when I lived in Italy. And sorry, losing my voice. This is something that's very common in Italy. They have versions of it throughout Europe and in Asia. The New Hampshire Aerospace and Defense Export Consortium I created, and it was actually the first industry-specific export consortium in America. The reason for that is because Americans are so competitive with each other, so it's a hard thing for them to learn and adjust to sharing information with each other. So it was a unique exercise to go through to develop this particular consortium. Also, sorry to say this, but New Englanders are not, always the best at communication. They're sort of lone wolf type people. So anyway, it was interesting. I had to go over the concept over and over and over until finally we had it created, and then the companies loved it. They loved it because they could share information, they could work together, they could collaborate, as you say, on larger RFPs. In this case, it was a defense consortium, so they could go after, or they can go after, they can team up to go after, larger contracts. We have a little thing that we're working on. I'm working with somebody else to develop the concept of an organization to present itself as a manufacturer. So you could take a team or an organization itself, or even a state, and say we are a manufacturer, because whatever this particular contract or job requires, we can pull together a team to do it. Because frankly, it's the small businesses that have the innovation, and we're not taking advantage of that. And we talk a good game about respecting the fact that small business is the backbone of our economy, but small businesses can't get funding, they can't get they don't get attention from the larger contractors and all of that. So we talk about it a lot, but we don't actually put it into practice. So I think consortium activity, collaboratives, ecosystems are really, really important. It's important that you do it officially.
We're losing, yeah, we're losing your audio again, unfortunately.
Am I still on?
Okay, there you're back.
You're back.
You know, what might be interesting, Dawn, is if you have any article, or Linda, you know, if you've come upon any interesting articles of successful examples of consortium approaches, particularly coming out of our region. But I'd love to maybe post a couple of those articles on our LinkedIn page, just to, I think it's an interesting approach.
I just wanted to mention it's a different type of consortium, but if people aren't aware of the ETC, the Eastern Trade Council, so the ETC is an organization, I think it's 11 New England states, but it includes New Jersey, New York, et cetera, that work together on various projects. And through that, we actually work with the other New England states and have created Best of New England pavilions at specific trade shows. So we've done, I've done in particular the Best of New England Pavilion at Medica in Germany every November. And what we do is, as a group, we work with the other New England states and say, okay, we're going to get a big space. We already have graphics, Best of New England, and every state can have 2 companies. And if the state doesn't get 2 companies, and another state could potentially get another company, and we have someone from the group that goes to represent the group to facilitate it. So this is an opportunity for small businesses who can't afford to pay for a big booth at a large international trade show like that, to go with a group, have their own little set podium within this much larger booth. And it's a very nice booth with meeting space and everything else within the USA Pavilion, and have support staff there. So I personally have done Medica, but I know they've also done Farnsborough for the air show. And so the group kind of decides. So it's a different type of consortium. Instead of being companies, it's the states getting together and trying to do something for the group to help the small businesses.
Yeah, I actually, thanks for bringing that up, Linda. I was actually one of the founders of the ETC, and it's actually New England plus New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware. So that's not an easy thing to do, but super proud of what they've accomplished. But it did start in New England with just the New England states, and the secretariat was the New England Council. So, you know, there are really good opportunities for the New England states to work together. They do that in tourism. They do it a little bit in defense now. It's kind of a new thing. I do think as a region, we don't take advantage of that enough. And because we have people that live in one state, work in another, we have industries, in particular aerospace and defense, that is a huge part of our economy. We could do so much more, get a lot more contracts in here, you know, if companies would learn to work together more. So it's something, you know, we should maybe take. I'm working with the New England Council to maybe do something special for that, but yeah, something to take into consideration.
And I may not be 100% correct, but I think the majority of representatives on the ETC are women.
Yeah, I mean, I've been away from it for a while, but it was kind of run by, in fact, strong-minded women. You know, we had to bring in a specialist once to teach us how to not, you know, argue with each other all the time. It was, it was really funny. Yeah, it was great, actually. But yeah.
So I have to just add a little anecdote to that. So again, you know, I'm Dawn's age and then some, and I actually went to a class. I can't remember the woman's name who did that. Leading Women was the organization, but it was to teach women how to, I don't want to say act more like men, but compete in a men's world. And it brought up all of the little things that we were sort of trained as women to do that we had to fight back against. Like when somebody wants coffee, you don't jump up and say, let me get it for you. Do you want cream and sugar? And when somebody says, oh, can you get some copy paper for us? You don't do it. You know, like, how do you sort of create your niche to not be the secretary or the admin in a situation? So, you know, really, it is a lot of things that I know I was doing as a woman that when pointed out to me, I saw that men would do it differently. Like, for instance, you have a report that's due and you stay up half the night and you make sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and you turn it in the morning and it's absolutely perfect. And it's like, okay, the guy comes in and is like, oh, I didn't quite get it all done, but I'll have it for you by noontime because I was out playing golf yesterday afternoon with so-and-so. It was just like a different approach. Ours is more perfection and having everything done properly and right and wanting to be complimented for it. And theirs was just a different approach to the work. Not so much based on being 100% accurate and have everything done right and everything being perfect, but communication style, I don't know what it was, but I think women, I don't know how the younger people feel, but I think we still face challenges in that area because of some of our personality traits.
Well, we've got about maybe 10 minutes before we start to go to the chat. So please, a reminder to put any questions you may have there. I've got a few more questions and then we'll start to look over there. I want to talk about where we are right now in trade. We're obviously in a very unusual period. Both of you are in the position of having to work with companies and guide them and how to navigate this COVID period when they're facing particular uncertainties around supply chain disruption, governments putting in place export curbs, import curbs, not knowing if your overseas customer is going to be able to pay, and all sorts of things. Can you, each of you, talk a little bit about what advice you're giving for companies to do sort of the best they can in a very uncertain time? Dawn, you want to start with you?
Sure. I guess I haven't run into huge challenges except for supply chain. So I would say, that it's important to watch out for changes in rules and regulations, especially now with this administration seems to be thinking off and on about changing things, and then they change their mind and all that. So I guess, just keep that in mind. I think you might need to look, depending on what industry you're in, and the fact that we're all working remotely, that there are some issues with your tech control plan. Export compliance wise, and it's really not my area, but I think you need to check your tech control plan and make sure your remote workers are in compliance. Obviously, supply chain is a huge issue. I'm quite interested in the fact that I think supply chains are going to change considerably. I think people are really veering away from purchasing from China for many reasons. And so you're finding that other countries, Asian countries in particular, Korea would be an example, are looking at bringing their operations closer to US shores. So there are great opportunities for foreign direct investment there, which, I'm only sort of speaking to the state related people here. And then of course, just maintain your network and be flexible and be cooperative. It's, for me, extremely important to maintain international trade fluidity. I think it's, I get very upset when you hear the politicians speak otherwise, but we are in a global, I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but we are in a global economy, period. It's not going to change. So if we start messing around with that, the entire world is going to suffer. So anyway, I don't have a huge, I don't know. I don't think we all, any of us really knows what's going to happen, except that we expect a huge drop in output in 2020. So I think we just need to be flexible and cooperative and I'm going to sound like a hippie now, but care about each other and just try to figure out what to do, with your clients and your suppliers and so forth.
Thank you. And so flexibility is the message, cooperation. Linda, what about you? What sort of messages are you giving? Are you telling people to kind of pause on kind of looking to international? Or are you saying go for it? But what are you?
No, we sort of, coined the phrase along with some other people of, prepare for the rebound. I mean, don't give up on your international business. One of the things that I do is manage a federal grant called STEP, and it's for small businesses, specifically to help them increase their export sales. And they have funding available that, for us, a large part of that funding went to support companies to participate in international trade shows. And of course, those are no longer happening anymore. So we have pivoted that, as well as the SBA with the grant, to helping people with their websites and e-commerce platforms and digital marketing, social media marketing. So we've been putting a big emphasis on trying to help people take the opportunity now to really upgrade their website, their communication, their, again, e-commerce platform, make sure their search engine optimization is up to speed, that they're targeting the markets appropriately, because where you can't travel and you're not having the in-person meetings, that's your prime way of communicating with the companies. And there's also opportunities now for virtual trade shows. So we have, as a state, we had 2 trade missions planned, which would have involved travel. One was to Germany that was supposed to happen in May, and then Western Canada. And we've pivoted now to both of those being virtual trade missions, and we've actually had higher participation rates because that means less time people have to take out of work, less expense for them for having to travel and pay travel expenses, but they're still getting those one-on-one introductions in a specific market to specific clients that might be able to do business with. So, you know, I think we've been relatively successful at continuing to move forward with exports and keeping them, you know, keeping a focus on not losing the standing that they have and helping them create more business. So, you know, it's a matter of helping everybody pivot. To me, that's the new word, pivot.
Okay. Pivot and prepare for the rebound. I like
Right.
that. Prepare. And I'll do a little commercial plug because I see Jeff Artis is on this call. To your point, Linda, about the importance of digital marketing and localizing your website and thinking strategically about search. I know Jeff's company, IBT Online, does just that for small business exporters. And in fact, the STEP grant that you referred to, some portion of the STEP grant is able to defray some of the costs of those digital marketing services. So,
Right.
So I'm going to stay a little bit on, you know, we talked a little bit about politics in the context of COVID and how governments are responding. Dawn, I'll come back to you. How important is it for companies to be mindful of politics, to think about politics in their overseas strategies? And do you, you know, we've seen certainly in our country during this administration, trade has very much been part of the national conversation. In other countries overseas as well, we've had some governments politicizing trade relationships, looking more inward. What do you counsel your companies to do with regard to keeping smart on politics, keeping current on politics?
So I am a big believer in understanding the politics of wherever you're trying to market your products to. I think that's part of understanding your market. And you know, you'll find that people from overseas know everything about our politics, so they take the time to do that because they know it's important and they're used to having to deal. We're not as, you know, so focused on exporting as a lot of other countries. Germany is a good example, a huge exporter for a small country. We're always competing with them. They're so much smaller, but really good at exporting. But anyway, I just personally think that it's really, really important to go into a market and to understand the politics and understand, you know, what you're confronting, because it's a big part of their culture and their life. Now, because I was a state trade director for so long, that was a big part of what I did when I would prepare for a trade mission, you know, for example. So even to minutia, I can remember taking then Governor Shaheen to Germany and warning her about capital punishment policies. You know, she wasn't a pro-capital punishment person until something happened in New Hampshire which swayed her a little bit. And I knew that when we met with the Prime Minister that was going to come up. And she didn't believe me, and it did. So she was prepared. Going into Northern Ireland, I was advancing a trade mission, and I knew I would have to understand, you know, something about the Troubles. And I had actually done a documentary in Northern Ireland, but that was way after this trip. And I was asked a question, and I knew they were trying to find out whether I was a Loyalist sympathizer or Republican sympathizer. And I knew exactly how to answer that question based on who was sitting in front of me, because I took the time, and I had never been there. Never ever been there, but I took the time to sort of understand the politics. Same thing, you know, Turkey is another good example. Trade mission that Governor Hassan did, and it was sponsored by the Turkish Cultural Center, and I know that they are loyal to Gulen instead of Erdogan, and I knew that she was going to run into all kinds of problems because of that, and so I had to. But nobody else had thought of that, and I'm like, you're going to look like an idiot when you go over there if you don't understand these things. So I just think it's really important based on the type of job you have, but certainly it's part of understanding the culture and the structure of where you're doing business. And if you're in an industry like defense, which is a big part of our, you know, industry base, you're going to have to know. those things. So that's my opinion.
Well, Linda, I don't know if you wanted to add, but we're now starting to have a lot of questions in the chat. So if it's okay with you, maybe we'll move over to there unless you had something
Sure.
specific you wanted to add on the politics piece. Okay.
The only thing I wanted to add about the politics piece is that you obviously you want to be prepared, for any political gaffes, that you don't want to be caught saying the inappropriate things or being in an inappropriate place, but it's also being aware of opportunities. So watch what's happening with the politics, with the economy, with maybe a new regime coming in, Brexit, for instance. They can create opportunities to be able to follow those and help other companies identify those opportunities. So.
Yep, good addition. Okay, so let's make our way down. I want to be fair to the people who asked a while ago. Okay, so we touched on this a little bit, but there's a question about how small companies handle language challenges for marketing purposes, building relationships, and some of these online services, like we mentioned, IVT helps with some of that. But is there anything you would offer in terms of some of the cultural language, some of those bridges to cross for small businesses?
Well, I just want to make a plug again for the STEP grant because, so just to be clear, every state can apply for the STEP grant. So my particular STEP grant program is just for Rhode Island companies. Massachusetts has their own plan and they're all slightly different, but there is funding available through the STEP grant to help, for instance, if you need to do translation of your marketing materials, or if you have to do a translation interpretation, you can use the money to hire interpreters for a meeting. You can use the money if you want to translate your website. So in terms of recognizing the need, that's great. It's important to understand you want to be able to communicate clearly and well and respectfully. And there is funding for small businesses, at least in Rhode Island, through the STEP grant to help with that.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll go to Dawn for this one. You've talked about the defense sector a couple of times, so perhaps this one would be good for you. So Stephanie Helm asks that Defense Department is implementing some cybersecurity certifications in order to be able to do business with our US DoD. Do you find other countries implementing cyber standards that our companies are having to comply?
Yeah, I know. I can't answer that with all certainty, but I do think that they are absolutely looking at that right now, and the EU in particular, trying to figure out how, as a union, they would deal with things like cybersecurity. There are a lot of new things that they have to find sort of common rules and regulations to deal with as a union. So cybersecurity is one of them. Drone operations is another. So yeah, that's a really good question, and I wish I could answer that better. Maybe I think we have someone on the in the group from Germany, and maybe she can answer that. But anyway, yes, they are, but I don't know how certain and how concrete they are.
Okay, well, we can look for some resources on that question, and maybe if I can find a couple of things and put that in the LinkedIn page. Emily asks, so Linda, maybe this will come back to you because you talked a little bit about virtual trade shows and how you've been able to make trade missions successful even in this environment. So Emily asks about, let's see, so she says, it's more complicated than just organizing one-on-one meetings instead of, taking a mission. What are some of the ways you've had to modify sort of the offerings to make them productive for participants? Is it, how are you using digital tools and other offerings?
Right. So, there's a lot of different tools, and we're still, like everybody else, finding the way forward, because one of the benefits of the in-person travel was obviously, the one-on-one in-person meetings. We used to organize networking receptions with key government officials. The companies would also get to know each other, and some of that has been lost. But at the same time, we're trying to get them to say, okay, maybe we put together a video of your company and we can present that in lieu of a personal presentation. So then when you have a meeting, they've already seen a video about your company and you can speak to that. Or trying to have smaller, like Zoom or other type of group meetings, like a roundtable discussion. That's another opportunity we've been looking at doing, is keeping it smaller so you can say, have a group like this. you know, where maybe you've got 10 people that can talk and they can see each other. And even though you can't be in the same room, you can expand it so that you can have a conversation. So we've been exploring a lot of these opportunities to see what works, and it'll be a trial and error adventure as we move forward. But the good thing about the virtual trade missions is, again, as I said, people don't have to travel. We can schedule the calls at their convenience. They don't have to have 1 week where they go to the country and everybody gets their set schedule. We have more flexibility with it. So again, we'll see. We haven't done our first one yet. And I'm sure it'll be a learning experience for us, but I think that people are going to like some of the advantages. And then if things go well and things start to ease up, they can then travel. So it's sort of like that introductory, let me get to know people, because when we do the trade missions also, we do a lot of background work, basically looking into whether their products have a good opportunity there, who the competitors are, you know, what kind of obstacles they might face with regulatory issues, et cetera, so that they're better prepared. And then they have those one-on-one meetings. And then if they want to travel, it's a bit more serious. They're closer to taking that next step.
I just wanted to say that it's really amazing how much everybody has pivoted, to use that word. We just did a presentation to the head of the Irish Air Corps for the Irish government, a company in Utah who has anti-drone technology, which they desperately need in Ireland and other places. And they did a demo that they would have normally done in person. Of course, we can't travel now, which is one of our big.
Can't hear you right now, Dawn, unfortunately.
Yeah, they did a huge presentation out in the field, and it's already gone all the way up to the Prime Minister. So, you know, there are ways of getting around and doing what you need to do.
You know, I just saw a comment come in from Turkey's Consul General, our friend Jalen, and we've got a couple more that I am going to get to, but let me ask you, Jalen, if you'd unmute yourself, would you like to make the announcement that you've just made here about the Turkish American Business Council, and perhaps actually, as you being a very senior woman that's, you know, involved in helping Turkish companies export from New England, FDI inbound and whatnot, if you could talk a little bit about your own experience as a very senior woman in the Turkish government working with companies.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm senior. Sounds differently to my ears these days.
Not old senior.
Yeah.
Senior.
But no. Anyway, thank you very much for the compliment, Leslie. And working with companies is well. I mean, we tend to leave the business alone as much as possible, you know. But also as the Consul General here, my role is to facilitate if any Turkish company wants to come here and take a role. And now there is this DEIC in Turkey, if you're familiar with what it is, maybe you are. It is the Foreign Council on Economic and Trade Relations, and it gathers many big Turkish companies together, and they do their own interactions and they carry their own business, and they work in terms of country councils. And there is a big Turkish American Business Council already, bringing together the biggest companies in Turkey. And very recently, and I might have had a role in that, very recently they opened up a New England chapter. And it has been very recent. They started in May, and they're led by, the council is led by Eczacıbaşı Holding CEO. And Eczacıbaşı is traditionally a big pharma company, and they already have lots of relations here in Massachusetts. But now they started their work in a very unusual time in history, and they're very much aware of that. But we already had our first meeting with MOIT, the Massachusetts Trade and Investment Office, and we had a very fruitful meeting to start with. And also, I have been discovering a lot of Turkish small businesses, actually entrepreneurs here, startup companies, led by Turks or Turkish Americans. And we have already started our connections with them. So I am very excited. I mean, everything is taking place virtually, but anybody who is interested in doing business with Turkey, please step up and get in touch with me, and we can establish the necessary connections. Yeah, I mean, moving into the virtual space has made some things difficult, but some things much easier. And also, Turkey has been successful in producing PPEs. For example, they also stepped up with the Massachusetts governor and with Maine and with New Hampshire, I believe, if I'm not wrong. And they have, you know, I mean, coming together virtually like this has made some things much easier, apart from the challenges. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we do have you to thank for that New England chapter opening up. You've been a real champion. It is exciting.
It's exciting. We can discuss about this separately with anybody.
And then frankly, had it not been for, you know, had COVID not arrived, we were all going to be doing a Women in World Trade event at your residence. You were one of the first to step up. So I look forward to that at some point.
Yeah. I mean, the garden is still very beautiful, and
I'm
I
sure.
hope that, yeah, I mean, we started to come together in small groups. So let's think about it. Maybe, you know, a small group gathering is still possible while it is not raining. And
socially distant happy hour. Well, I've got one more question that I want to ask from the chat, and then maybe we'll go to one last closing question for our speakers. The last question is from Peta Khan from Invest Northern Ireland, and she asks about the U.S. Push on Buy American, and frankly, that's true. I think Vice President Biden has also talked about Buy America. So regardless of administration, there's a big push on localization. And her question is, do you think this will impact New England companies in terms of their appetite to export or maybe even, you know, sourcing from overseas, given such a sort of a political and other push for going after domestic opportunities?
You want me to go?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, I do. I do. I think, you know, it's already not the easiest thing to get Americans to look at exporting. Like I mentioned before, you have other countries that live and breathe on foreign markets. And, you know, the United States is a really big country, and we don't necessarily have to export. So certainly any company that can sell locally instead of having to deal with all of the you know, the added issues of exporting or buy from a local company would certainly do that. I don't see any reason, you know, why not. So yeah, I do think so.
I would just add is that I'm not sure how much of it is from the current administration's push on Buy American as it is a result of the pandemic, which has really reinforced the difficulties of relying on a global supply chain and the difficulties of getting product from overseas with long transit times and, you know, the costs and the expenses involved with it, as opposed to being able to rely on local partners. So, you know, I think in my opinion, it's more as a result of the disruption we've recently seen, that people are wanting to bring things closer. So there's a big push for onshoring and reshoring their productions, as well as finding local sources or just even secondary sources of product. But we still can't get away from the fact that some things are just made better and cheaper in other markets in the United States. So I think we'll always have, you know, a demand for that, as well as people having a demand for US made products, but there will be a shift.
Right, there are a lot of factors driving that, not just the the politics of the day. You're right, big push on onshoring and reshoring. So to close, you know, the topic of our event today was sort of lessons learned, and I just thought if I could ask each of you, just briefly, please, because I know we're at the time, to share one or two of the main lessons that you've learned over the course of a long career in international trade and advising companies. Could each of you maybe share one or two main lessons that you've taken away?
On my part, I think I'm going to be repetitive, but I think that developing a solid network and maintaining a reputation and a system that you use around the world is really important. It's a lot of work. to do that. Certainly social media makes that a lot easier. But you know, I fall back on my network all the time. I mean, it's pretty cool. You know, having been doing this for a long time, you know, I can throw a country at me and I have a really good contact in any particular country at a particular level. It's really, really important. And as Americans have a tendency to not think long term. You know, we just think about the next sale and that's it. But, you know, you have to be thinking about, you know, creating your structure and your foundation in world trade. And, you know, again, we're going to harp on the cultural things, and that has to do with your relationships as well as your marketing. So, you know, take the time to, and it's fun. I mean, I happen to have a passion for that. Maybe that's why I think it's important, so I can feed my passion, but, you know, understanding other cultures and, you know, everything from gift exchange to colors to, you know, what you do when you go to somebody's house when you're in Japan, you know, politics and all of that. It's really, really important. So I just, no matter, you know, if you can do that, you will have a great structure and a great network around the world, and you can accomplish a lot with that.
And I would just add, in fact, Dawn stole my word, it's fun. I mean, international business is fun, and the opportunities are endless, and the opportunities for you to make an impact are endless. You know, and there's so many directions you can go in. There's so many things that can be done. I mean, listen to Dawn and all the different initiatives she's started up and been creative with, and there's a need for that. So nobody should feel locked into any one sort of career path in terms of what they're currently doing, because with the knowledge and the network that you create, there's an opportunity to do so many things. And again, it's like the sky's the limit, the world's the limit. So I would just say to people, you know, follow your passions and create your own path. I look back at what I've done, and I never would have expected that. And some of it was just opportunities that fell into my lap. Some of it was just connections that led to the next connection, that led to the next connection, you know, being willing to take a risk and try something. I mean, I commuted to Chicago for a year for an opportunity because it sounded exciting, and it was a lot of fun. So I guess, you know, what I would say is, if this is your passion, and when I say it's your passion, you love international, you love different cultures, you love different countries, you love politics, you know, I don't mean politics per se, but the changing politics, then follow that passion. And, you know, you can really get into most anything with the background you're building.
Yeah, just really quickly to build on that, just remember, any of you who are developing your career, you don't have to do business. If you love international, if you love travel, you love the world, you love other cultures, you can do so many things. You can do, I love international economic development. You can do development itself. You can be in the political world, you can be a journalist, or you can do business. You can be a marketeer. There are a million things that you can do to feed that passion.
Yep.
It's always good to end on a message of fun and having fun. So
Yeah.
end on that point. I thought this was a wonderful conversation. This was like a really nice mix of sort of the personal and the professional, and you both were terrific. And what we'd like to do as a follow-up, Ursula and I, is to take some of the resources that each of you shared, whether it's the STEP grant or in the Chafee Center, maybe it's the Eastern Trade Council, anything you may have on the role of consortium, and examples maybe of companies in New England. Let's pull some of that together. We can promote the link to the new Turkish American chapter that's just been founded. So we'll post that on the LinkedIn page. And remember also to check that page. I've been really happy to see different individual members of the group using that page to announce your own events, whether that's a consular event or another organization networking group. So check on there, because we're starting to see some really great trade-focused events advertised. And we ourselves will have news for you of our next program in about a month's time. So stay tuned on that. So thank you, everybody, for giving us an hour of your time. It's fun to see everybody. Thanks to our speakers. Thanks again, Ursula and Emily, for your support, and wishing everybody a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Leslie. Thanks for the invite. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.